Born into a household where control was the norm, my early years were anything but normal. My father, a man with an iron will and stern demeanor, held the reins of our family life, defining our every move. He was a towering figure, a constant, looming presence that cast long shadows over my childhood. Meanwhile, my mother was a specter, a wisp of a presence that flitted in and out of our lives. Her absence was as big a part of my upbringing as my father's dominance. In her absence, my father's control grew tighter, his hold on us unyielding. Growing up in such a volatile environment, I learned early on to tread lightly, to keep my head down. My self-esteem was a casualty of this war of wills, crumbling under the weight of constant criticism and control. I was a child, yet I felt small, insignificant, a mere pawn in the grand scheme of my father's world. Then there was Lily, my older sister. Our relationship, much like everything else in my life, was defined by our father's rules. She was the golden child, the favored one, and I was the one who was always falling short, always left in the shadows. This dynamic forged a deep-seated resentment within me, a silent rebellion that would later come to define my relationship with her. The tension between us was palpable, a silent war that raged beneath the surface of our seemingly normal sibling relationship. It was a strain that was felt in every interaction, every shared glance, every unspoken word. This was my childhood, a turbulent whirlpool of control, absence, and strained relationships. It was a time that shaped me, molded me into the person I am today. It was a time that taught me about power, about manipulation, about loss. This was the dysfunctional platform on which my life was built, a platform that would later become the foundation for my quest for independence, my fight for autonomy, my struggle to break free from the chains of my past. Growing up, my relationship with Lily was fraught with tension, largely due to her sense of entitlement. As children, Lily and I were inseparable. We laughed, we cried, we fought, and we made up, just like any pair of siblings. But as we grew older, a chasm began to form between us. This chasm was not born out of rivalry or jealousy, but rather a sense of entitlement that Lily seemed to harbor. Lily was always the favored one, the apple of our father's eye. In her world, everyone else existed to serve her needs. This became particularly evident when she became a mother. She assumed that her children were my responsibility as much as they were hers. I was expected to babysit her kids at a moment's notice, regardless of my own plans or needs. This expectation was not only unfair, but also emotionally draining. I found myself constantly juggling between my personal life and the imposed duties of an unpaid nanny. The joy I once found in being an aunt was slowly replaced by resentment and frustration. The worst part was the manipulative tactics Lily employed to get her way. If I ever voiced my concerns or tried to decline her requests, she would guilt me into submission. She would say things like, "You're the only family I have," or "The kids miss their aunt." These emotionally charged statements were designed to make me feel selfish for prioritizing my own needs. The emotional toll was immense. I began to question my self-worth and my ability to set boundaries. I felt trapped in a cycle of manipulation and guilt. Each time I caved into Lily's demands, I felt a piece of my independence slip away. But there comes a point in life when you realize that you have to take a stand. For me, that moment came when I understood the true cost of Lily's entitlement. My relationship with Lily was not based on mutual respect or understanding, but on her selfish needs and my inability to assert myself. I realized that I had to assert myself and set boundaries. I knew that this decision would strain our relationship even further, but it was a necessary step towards reclaiming my independence and self-worth. One day, I decided I had had enough. This was the pivotal moment when Amelia chose to assert herself, to break free from the chains of manipulation and entitlement that had bound her for so long. It was time to confront Lily and their father, to challenge the norms that had been forced upon her. Amelia's newfound assertiveness was like a spark, igniting a family conflict that had been smoldering just beneath the surface. The tension was palpable as she stood her ground, refusing to be bullied into taking on responsibilities that were not hers to bear. It was a daunting experience, but Amelia was resolute, fueled by her determination to reclaim her independence. The aftermath was tumultuous. Feelings were hurt, relationships strained, and the family dynamic forever altered. But through this confrontation, Amelia discovered a strength she didn't know she possessed. It was a difficult step, but a necessary one. This was Amelia's declaration of independence, her first step toward self-empowerment. When my brother Alex asked me to cater his wedding, I saw it as an opportunity for reconciliation. An olive branch extended, a chance to mend fences. Some might say I was naive, but I was hopeful. The day of the wedding arrived, and with it, a storm of hostility. My father's cold shoulder, Lily's scornful glances, their disapproval hung in the air like a dark cloud. My every move, every dish I prepared was met with criticism. I was not a guest, but an intruder. As the evening wore on, the tension escalated. My father's words, steeped in disdain, echoed in my ears. "You're nothing more than a glorified babysitter." My sister's laughter, laced with sarcasm, sent chills down my spine. I felt myself shrinking, regressing to that little girl who always sought their approval. But I was no longer that little girl. I had grown, I had changed. I was Amelia, the entrepreneur, the independent woman. I had a voice, and it was time to use it. So I did the unthinkable. I withdrew my services. Right in the middle of the reception, I packed up my catering equipment, my staff, and I left. The wedding, once a symphony of celebration, was now a cacophony of chaos. The cake was half finished, the main course was missing, and the guests were left in a state of shock. The public fallout was immediate. The whispers, the stares, the scandal, it was all too much. But what was even more striking was the exposure of my family's dysfunction. The facade of a happy, loving family was shattered. The truth was out there for everyone to see. The manipulation, the control, the emotional blackmail. The wedding was a disaster, but it was a turning point for me. It was the moment I stood up for myself, the moment I chose my self-worth over familial obligation. It was the moment I broke free from the cycle of manipulation. It was messy, it was painful, but it was necessary, and it was the first step towards my journey of self-empowerment. Despite the hardships, I knew I had to reconnect with my past to move forward. This became my mantra, my guiding light on the road to reconciliation. With every step, I began to shed the weight of resentment and anger that had been my constant companions for so long. It wasn't easy. There were days when the hurt seemed too deep, the breach too wide, but I was determined. I had to break free from the chains of my past to redefine who I was and what I stood for. My first step was to reconnect with my mother, a relationship that had been strained and distant due to years of absence. It was a tentative beginning, filled with awkward silences and hesitant conversations. But as we slowly started to open up, I began to see the woman behind the mother. She too had been a victim of my father's dominance, her own dreams and aspirations stifled. This shared experience brought us closer, healing old wounds and creating newfound respect and understanding. But reconciliation was not just about mending old relationships. It was also about forging new ones. I reached out to my siblings, not with blame or resentment, but with empathy and understanding. We had all been pawns in a game of manipulation and control. By acknowledging this, we were able to start breaking the cycle, replacing resentment with forgiveness, anger with compassion. There were also legal battles to be fought, a public fallout to be managed. But I faced it all with renewed strength and determination. I wasn't the scared, helpless girl anymore. I was a woman who had found her voice, who stood up for what was right, who demanded respect. And with each passing day, I grew stronger. I began to see the beauty in my scars, the strength in my struggles. I realized that I was not defined by my past, but by how I chose to move forward. It was a long journey, but I finally found the strength to overcome my past and redefine what loyalty meant to me. I found the courage to be true to myself, to set my own boundaries, to choose my own path. And in doing so, I found the greatest gift of all, self-empowerment. My story is a testament to the resilience required to overcome toxic relationships. The chapters of my life filled with familial conflict and struggle for self-assertion taught me invaluable lessons. Firstly, setting boundaries is not an act of rebellion, but an assertion of one's rights. It is about creating a safe space where our needs and feelings are respected. My resistance to unfair expectations from my sister, Lily, marked a turning point in my journey towards self-assertion. Secondly, independence is not a threat to familial ties, but a path towards self-empowerment. My decision to withdraw my services at Alex's wedding was a bold step towards asserting my business autonomy. Lastly, seeking healing is not a sign of weakness, but a strength. Rebuilding ties with my mother, despite our tumultuous past, hinted at the possibility of growth and recovery. In the end, I learned that the path to self-empowerment often involves breaking free from the chains of the past.